It's funny how seemingly small annoyances can pile up into a towering mountain of resentment. I never wanted to become that person, the bitter neighbor who nurses grudges like a pet. But here we are. I can still picture the moment it all began, that fateful evening when Lucas, my charming but infuriating neighbor, decided that my driveway was his personal parking lot. It was one of those scorching summer days when the sun seemed to hang heavy in the sky, baking our suburban neighborhood into a sleepy haze. I could smell the grass being freshly mowed, its sharp, earthy scent mingling with the sweet aroma of my homemade lemonade. I had just stepped out onto my porch, ready to unwind with a good book, when I spotted Lucas's sleek black sedan blocking my way again. The absurdity of it made my blood boil. He had already played this game too many times. Lucas is that kind of guy, the one who flashes a disarming smile and has a way of making even the most mundane conversation feel like a special encounter. He's charming and handsome, with tousled hair that catches the light just right, making it hard to dislike him. But underneath that easygoing demeanor lurks a selfishness that grates on my last nerve. I could hear him laughing with someone inside his car, his latest Tinder match, no doubt. The laughter floated like delicate bubbles through the air, infuriatingly carefree. I couldn't see her, but I pictured a young woman, wide-eyed and excited, her heart fluttering at the prospect of a perfect first date. Meanwhile, here I stood, my plans for a peaceful evening shattered by his thoughtlessness. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting an orange glow over my neighborhood, a stark contrast to the darkening storm brewing within me. I felt the familiar fire of anger ignite, hot and unyielding, as I paced in front of the blockade that had become a familiar fixture in my life. It's funny, really, how something as trivial as a blocked driveway could turn into a festering wound, one that I had tried to ignore for far too long. But tonight would be different. I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh-cut grass somehow mixing with the smoldering ember of my simmering rage. This was the moment when the scales tipped. I could feel it in my bones. Tonight, I would take action. Maybe it was the heat, or perhaps the weight of all those unresolved frustrations that pushed me over the edge, but one thought echoed in my mind with relentless clarity. He had made a choice, one too many times, and now it was my turn to remind him that his actions had consequences. As I slipped my phone from my pocket, a chill ran down my spine, an omen of what was to come. Little did I know, this would become a twisted tale that would forever change the dynamic of our little cul-de-sac. A date might have been on the line, but revenge was not far behind. As I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, I tried to talk myself down. Maybe it's not that big of a deal, I thought. People make mistakes. But deep down, I knew this was far from a simple mistake. This was a pattern, an ongoing narrative of disrespect. Lucas didn't just block my driveway, he dismissed my space, my time, my very existence. Each time he parked in front of my house, it felt like a symbolic declaration, your needs don't matter. I clenched my fists, feeling the tension in my muscles as I imagined how many times I'd allowed his selfishness to slide by. The first time he parked there, I shrugged it off. I didn't want to rock the boat. I chalked it up to him having a rough day. The second time, I knocked on his door, and he smiled, apologizing profusely, stating it wouldn't happen again. I wanted to believe him. But the third, fourth, and fifth times, the pattern became painfully clear. Each apology was as empty as the promises he made. And now, as I watched him through his tinted windows, chuckling with his date, I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. I had seen my own reflection in his casual disregard, and it sickened me. How can he laugh while I'm stuck here fuming? I thought. My mind raced back to my own attempts at connecting with others, how I had once tried a dating app, only to be ghosted or treated like an afterthought. This was a man who could effortlessly charm anyone, all while treating me like a doormat. Is this really the kind of neighbor I want to be? I grappled with the question, a gnawing sense of sadness creeping in. I had preferred to be the calm, understanding neighbor, but he had turned me into a simmering cauldron of resentment. Each laugh I heard from his car felt like a personal slap in the face. The more I thought about it, the more I began to view our interactions as a twisted game, a game I had been losing. The sadness morphed into a searing anger, filling my veins like molten lava. It was no longer just about a blocked driveway, it was about reclaiming my dignity. Why should I let him have the upper hand? I thought, even as a part of me wanted to resist this dark urge. I could feel the urge for revenge crawling up my spine, a whispering seduction. It was intoxicating, powerful, a way to wrestle back control over my own life. Just one more time, I told myself, staring at the sleek black car, an extension of his entitlement. One more time, and he'll understand the consequences of his actions. I felt a wicked thrill at the thought, an idea that had been festering under the surface for far too long. The image of him stepping out of his date and discovering his car absent sent a shiver of excitement through me. Was I really going to do this? A part of me tried to step back, to reason with the voice that whispered sweetly of revenge, but the anger had taken root. I imagined Lucas's face, a mixture of confusion and disbelief, replaced by embarrassment as he scoured the streets for his beloved sedan. It was petty, yes, but it felt justified, an equalizer in a world that seemed eager to trivialize my needs. My heart raced as I scrolled through the contacts on my phone, searching for the number of the towing company I had used in the past. I could almost hear the gears of fate grinding as the weight of my decision sank in. The phone felt heavy in my hand, each digit a step deeper into this dark rabbit hole I was willingly plunging into. As I dialed the number, a giddy mix of adrenaline and dread coursed through me. "Hi there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as the operator answered. "I need to report a vehicle blocking my driveway." Each word felt like a confession, a step further away from the person I thought I was. I provided the details, Lucas's car, the make and model, the location, and with every minute I spent on the call, I felt my resolve hardening. I was finally taking control. But just as my heart began to swell with a morbid sense of satisfaction, it all came crashing down. The operator informed me that they would dispatch a tow truck immediately. I hung up, my hands shaking slightly as I turned to stare at Lucas's car once more. The laughter inside the vehicle had risen, filling the warm evening air with an almost mocking tone. I could almost envision his date, her laughter washing away any worries she might have had, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. What if they came outside and I was caught? The thought sent an icy wave of apprehension through me. I tried to shake it off, to reassure myself that it was too late to back down now. But as I stood there, a witness to their carefree banter, the joy I had briefly felt about my petty vendetta began to dissolve into something darker. Suddenly, I was struck by an overwhelming wave of humiliating doubt. I had grown up striving to be better than the people who let their tempers dictate their actions, those who reveled in drama and chaos. Had I really lowered myself to this level? I fought back against the inner voice that scolded me, but the tension was building, like a pressure cooker ready to blow. Minutes passed like hours as I waited, a prisoner to my own impulses. I paced back and forth, nerves fraying at the edges. The laughter inside the car had dulled to a soft murmur, punctuated by the occasional burst of excitement from his date. With each passing moment, I felt more isolated, trapped in my own feelings of resentment and regret. How did it come to this? Then, the unmistakable sound of a tow truck rumbling down the street sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I held my breath, watching as the truck pulled up in front of my house. The driver emerged, a burly man with tattoos sprawling down his arms, his demeanor all business. In that moment, I could hardly believe it was happening. My heart raced, a symphony of fear and exhilaration as I realized that there was no going back now. As the driver approached the parked car, I felt a sickening mix of anticipation and dread. What would Lucas say when he finally noticed? Would he accuse me? Would his date laugh, or would she be horrified? I peered through the darkened windows of his car, straining to see their reaction. Would they hear the commotion outside? And then, in an abrupt moment of cosmic irony, I witnessed the complete unraveling of the evening. Lucas's date opened the door to step outside, mischief glinting in her eye as she said something teasing that made him chuckle. But as soon as they both glanced toward the street, their laughter fell away. Lucas's expression morphed from delight to confusion and horror, his jovial demeanor evaporating like dew in the morning sun. In that second, as the realization washed over his face, I felt an intoxicating surge of power. It was a feeling I hadn't anticipated, a rush that sent a shiver down my spine. I hadn't just redirected my frustration, I had taken the reins of my narrative and spun it into something undeniably satisfying. Lucas's laughter faltered, his smile fading as he stepped forward, the casual confidence he wore like a mantle slipping away. I could see the moment he registered what was happening. His eyes widened, darting from the tow truck to his beloved black sedan, and the mirth that once danced across his features was replaced by confusion and disbelief. It was beautiful, an unfiltered reflection of the chaos I'd spent months curating, and I stood frozen, a spectator to my own masterpiece. "Wait, what?" he began, his voice rising, frantic. His date, a striking blonde with sparkling eyes, followed his gaze, a mix of confusion and concern crinkling her brow. I was captivated by the dynamic, a perfect embodiment of my earlier insecurities. His charm, his easy laughter, all of it had built up a facade, and now it was cracking in real time. The driver of the tow truck approached Lucas with an air of nonchalance, clipboard in hand, as if they were simply discussing the weather instead of about to haul away his prized possession. "You can't park here, buddy. Blocking someone's driveway is a big no-no," he stated matter-of-factly, his voice gruff but not unkind. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with implications, and I felt a savage thrill at the sight of my neighbor's veneer of confidence crumbling under the weight of his own arrogance. Lucas stammered, I didn't think," but his protest fell flat. The words felt empty, hollowed out by the reality that he had consistently ignored the needs of those around him, including mine. It was poetic in a way, he had built his world around the idea that he could do as he pleased, but now he was about to experience the consequences of his choices. I could hear the muffled laughter from inside the tow truck as the driver pointed to the sign at the end of my driveway, clearly stating the no parking rules. Each word felt like a hammer hitting a nail deeper into the coffin of Lucas's bravado. I wanted to scream with glee, to burst into applause at the poetic justice unfolding before me, but I knew I had to remain in the shadows, a silent puppeteer pulling the strings of this elaborate setup. Meanwhile, his date stood beside him, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she realized what was happening. "Lucas, is this your car?" She looked back and forth between him and the truck, bewildered. For a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of guilt for her, but it was quickly extinguished by a wave of self-satisfaction. He deserved this, he had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it. "I can't believe this," Lucas exclaimed, throwing his hands up in exasperation, a sharp edge in his voice that only served to escalate the situation. I could almost feel the heat radiating off his skin, the embarrassment mixing with indignation. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. My heart raced as I focused on their interaction, the emotional stakes rising higher with each passing moment. Lucas was no stranger to confrontation, but this was a reckoning he hadn't prepared for. His confidence was with adrenaline surging through my veins. I began to formulate what I believed would be a masterstroke in this game of neighborly revenge. I needed a plan that would not only serve as payback but also ensure that Lucas got the message loud and clear. Here's how I decided to execute my wickedly clever plot step by step. Before going all in on my revenge, I needed to assess the situation further. I knew that Lucas had a pretty routine lifestyle, but I needed to fine-tune the details. I made it a point to pay attention to his schedule over the next few days. When did he usually go on dates? What time did he leave for work? I even sat on my porch, feigning casual interest while taking note of when he parked and, more importantly, when he didn't. I worried he might catch on to my observations, but I convinced myself that being discreet would be easy. Just act natural, right? I learned Lucas typically had Tinder dates on Friday evenings, often just as the sun began to set. This was my window of opportunity. I decided to pick a particular Friday, one when I sensed he had a date scheduled. I made sure to confirm that the driveway was blocked. After all, that was the crux of my plan. Once I had a target date, I reached out to the towing company again, this time under the guise of a neighborly concern. "Hey, I noticed a vehicle has been frequently blocking the driveway right across from mine. I'd hate for something unfortunate to happen to it, you know. If it could be towed when it's blocking the drive, I'd be so thankful." I feigned innocence, ensuring they'd be available on that particular Friday evening. I was deeply entangled in this web of deceit, and the weight of the lie felt like a boulder on my chest. What if the towing company didn't come through? What if they got lost or decided to bail? I had to keep my cool and trust the plan. On the evening of the date, I needed to create the perfect diversion to ensure Lucas would park in his usual spot. I decided to host a barbecue on my front lawn, inviting a few of the neighbors over for some casual fun. I knew Lucas often had a habit of joining in whenever there was a gathering, thinking he could charm everyone with his stories. I scheduled everything to start around 6 p.m. I strategically set up the barbecue so that it would literally block his view of my driveway. The smoke, the laughter, the sounds of sizzling burgers, it would all be an alluring call to him, begging him to join in the fray and, more importantly, park his car right where I wanted him. I waited, heart racing, as my fellow neighbors mingled and enjoyed the food. Sure enough, it wasn't long before I spotted Lucas's car turning onto our street, just as I had predicted. My heart did a little dance of glee as he parked right in front of my driveway, unaware of the impending chaos about to unfold. At this point, I felt the familiar pang of doubt creeping in. What if things didn't go according to plan? What if he didn't block the driveway enough? I had to keep my composure, reminding myself that it was all coming together. Step 6, the moment arrived like a thunderclap. As Lucas stepped out of his sleek black sedan, he wore that same confident grin he used to charm everyone around him. But tonight, that smile would soon be stripped away, along with any dignity he clung to. My heart raced, pounding in syncopation with the simmering tension that hung thick in the humid evening air. He glanced towards my barbecue gathering, where laughter and chatter bounced like balloons, filling the air with an unmistakable sense of festivity. I could hardly hold back a smirk as I pretended to toss a burger on the grill, my eyes slyly watching him through the smoke. The scent of grilled meat mingled with the steady thrum of my pulse. It was intoxicating. His date emerged next, a vision of excitement as she twirled in her dress, her laughter ringing out like chimes. She was completely oblivious to the impending train wreck about to unfold. I could feel a sense of poetic justice sinking in, a perfect storm brewing right before my eyes. As Lucas approached, I caught the initial glimmer of confusion in his eyes as they landed on my driveway. The laughter faded into a controlled silence, replaced by the soft crackling of the barbecue. I could sense the shift in the air as he started to piece it together. Wait, is this? He turned back to his date, who looked just as puzzled, her eyebrows knitting together in concern. In that moment, dread washed over his features like ice water cascading down his spine. The laughter from the party around me felt like a cruel mockery of his unraveling confidence. My heart danced with glee. There was something so satisfying about his slow realization. He was trapped in his own self-inflicted dilemma. Just as he began to close the distance between us, the low rumble of the tow truck echoed down the street, a harbinger of chaos. I could see his eyes widen, pupils dilating as disbelief washed over him. He turned, seeking the source of the sound, and there it was, the very sign of his impending embarrassment trundling toward him. The driver of the tow truck hopped out, clipboard in hand, with a swagger that only added to the theatricality of the moment. "Sorry, buddy. This vehicle's blocking the driveway. Can't have that." His tone was devoid of sympathy, a perfect counterpoint to Lucas's disbelief. "No. Wait," shouted Lucas, his voice rising in desperation as he sprinted toward the truck. His charming veneer had shattered, and all that remained was a frantic man scrambling to salvage whatever he could. The panic in his voice sent a shiver of exhilaration through me. Finally, he was experiencing the chaos I had endured for far too long. With all due respect, the driver began, his brow furrowed as he gestured at the clearly posted no parking signs. "You can't park here, man. This driveway's off limits." The driver's face was a mask of indifference, and I could feel the thrill of justice course through me like a jolt of electricity. Lucas tried to explain, but his words were just an incoherent jumble of frustration and embarrassment. This is my car. I was just, but his voice had dwindled, overtaken by the roar of the engine and the mounting laughter echoing from my barbecue. Each ounce of amusement from my neighbors felt like a knife twisting into him, and it was glorious. His date stood frozen, mouth agape, unable to comprehend the scene unfurling before her eyes. I could almost see the thoughts racing. The chaos of Lucas's embarrassment reverberated through the evening air like a haunting melody, a satisfying echo of justice that rang true in my ears. As the tow truck driver maneuvered the vehicle onto the flatbed, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet twinge of remorse mixed with the elation of having taken control. Lucas's world was crumbling in front of me, the charade of charm and confidence he had built now reduced to a fragile facade. His date, who had seemed so thrilled moments earlier to be out with him, now stood in stunned silence, her excitement evaporating like vapor in the crisp night air. I caught the flicker of confusion in her eyes, her expression morphing from amusement to pity as she processed the scene unfolding before her. The reality of the situation was a stark contrast to the romantic narrative she'd likely envisioned for their evening. It was a cruel twist of fate, and for a brief moment, I felt a flash of compassion for her. But it was quickly overshadowed by the satisfaction of witnessing Lucas's public humiliation. As the truck drove away with his beloved black sedan in tow, Lucas turned back toward me, his expression shifting from anger to incredulity, a whirlwind of emotions flooding his features. "Did you do this?" he shouted, his voice a mix of rage and desperation. The words hung in the air, sharp and accusing, as my neighbors all turned to look at the unfolding drama, their eyes wide with a mix of shock and intrigue. "I don't know what you're talking about, Lucas," I replied, feigning innocence, the corners of my mouth twitching into a barely contained smile. "Maybe if you hadn't blocked my driveway, this wouldn't have happened." The satisfaction of delivering that line washed over me like a soothing balm, a damning reminder of the many times he had dismissed my boundaries. The laughter of my neighbors mingled with Lucas's furious sputtering, creating a cacophony of joy that filled the night. It was a moment of poetic justice, a culmination of months of pent-up frustration released in a single instance of vulnerability. As his embarrassment painted his cheeks a fiery shade of crimson, I knew I had won this battle. But with each passing second, the thrill of my revenge began to dull, replaced by an unsettling pang of guilt. Watching Lucas's humiliation unfold had felt exhilarating, but the aftermath was far murkier. I had become the very person I had never intended to be, the villain in someone else's story. I had taken pleasure in his pain, and it hung over me like a dark cloud. In the days that followed, I witnessed the consequences of my actions reverberate through our small community. Lucas became a shell of his former self, a man stripped of the confidence that had once radiated from him like a beacon. He retreated into his home, offering only curt nods to those who dared to engage with him. The laughter that had once filled my evenings with warmth was replaced by an awkward tension, a silent acknowledgement of the incident that had become the talk of the neighborhood. As the weeks wore on, I caught glimpses of him through the curtains of his house, moments where he sat alone in the dim light, a distant figure framed by shadows. I felt a pang of guilt gnawing at me. The weight of my revenge settled heavily on my shoulders, a bitter reminder that the thrill I had chased was now a source of regret. I had wanted to teach him a lesson, but in the process, I had stripped him of the very essence that had made him human. The social consequences began to ripple outward like